G'day guys, welcome to this episode of Aussie English. Today we're going to be focusing on the Australian accent and specifically variations in it. So this question comes from Will, who left me a voicemail on the Aussie English website. Let's have a listen.
What's up, man? How are ya? So the question is, why do you speak a little bit different from the ones that are me, for example, use it to hear at work or on the street? Because me and Klaus here, we both think that you speak a little bit more clear. So, for example, when you say wife, you say like we say, like we've learned. So it looks like it's open, you know what I mean? And the people normally they would say wife, no wife, say wife, you know what I mean? So I don't know if you do that just to be more clear or if you really speak like this. And same for like fine. The same thing. So you say fine, it's open and it's clear for us. But when you watch a TV or you're on the street, you hear people talking, you can hear them, they say fine, not fine, you know? So it's just one question for you. Alright? See you, man. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for the question, Will. I'll be hitting you up with a month's worth of free access to the Aussie English Supporters Pack. And if any of you guys listening want a month's free access as well, feel free to hit me up with a voice message. And if I feature it on one of these episodes, you'll also get a month's free access to the Aussie English Supporter Pack. And just quickly, the Aussie English Supporter Pack is your way of supporting Aussie English, and it's only $9.99 a month at the moment. I'll probably increase it in the future, but you get access to premium transcripts, you get all sorts of extra bonus exercises and language learning tips. So definitely check that out if you're interested on the Aussie English website. Anyway, let's dive into this episode, guys. So, the Australian English accent is renowned for its lack of regional differences, and this isn't too surprising given that it was only colonised in the late 1700s, about 10 years after the US Declaration of Independence. So Australia, the accents in Australia at least don't really vary like they do in places like the US, which has really different regional accents. However, there still are differences. So, linguists Arthur Delbridge and A.G. Mitchell developed a classification system for the three main Australian accents in 1965, and they created three accent categories: the broad accent, the general accent, and the cultivated accent. So the general accents represent the most common types of Australian English accents. So if you guys know the ex-Prime Minister Julia Gillard, she's a good example.
You know, when you meet the Queen, she's one of those people that's been so in your world, you know, my whole lifetime, that you feel like you know her.
Broad Australian accents are more extreme, and these are associated with working class speech. So think of people like Steve Irwin and the character Crocodile Dundee.
And Mum was a maternity nurse who actually wanted to follow her passion, which was joey kangaroos and koalas and wombats and platypus.
And then we have the cultivated accent, which is a more prestigious variety, somewhat closer to British pronunciation from people like Kate Blanchett.
Yes, well, no, I actually grew up in Melbourne, and then I came to Sydney to go to the National Institute here, and then got catapulted out, and I thought, well, I'll give it 5 years and see what happens.
And so a lot of actors tend to have this kind of accent. And going back to answering Will's question, this is probably my accent, if I can be so bold as to say I'm a cultivated Australian English accent user. I think the main reason that I have a cultivated English accent is probably because I have been at university so long, and so I haven't really been around a lot of working class Australians the same way I would have been if I had, say, left high school and gotten a real job. And also I think because I have been so surrounded by so many foreigners, my Australian English has been kind of forced to become a more subtle, closer to British English, proper British English in the way that I speak, because it's a little easier to understand. So I think that as a result of being at university for so long, and as a result of having so many foreign friends and living in the multicultural city that is Melbourne, that's the reason that my accent is as subtle and cultivated as it seems. So Australia is clearly a continuum with regards to accents. It's not really regional like the US, as we stated. So how are these accents sorted into the three categories that they fall in? So a study was published in the Australian Journal of Linguistics in 1997, and these guys tried to define this. The researchers started by making impressionistic judgments based on large numbers of recorded Australian subjects. So they probably had a whole bunch of Australians sit down, they listened to them speak, and they put them in one of these three categories based on their own subjective impressions. So they placed them in these three categories: the broad accent, the general accent, and the cultivated accent. And then they analysed the vowel sounds of these speakers in these three groups to decide which features corresponded with each of these accents. And the results weren't really that shocking. The further on the broad end of the spectrum an accent sits, the more stereotypically Australian the features of that accent. The funny thing is, this study actually honed in on that same diphthong that you were talking about in your question, Will. The diphthong that you mentioned in words like fine and wife is actually one of those diphthongs that varies between accents. So you found it as well. Anyway, the diphthong in fine, wife, and ride, so that I sound, the more broad the accent gets, the more this vowel sound moves towards the diphthong in words like choice, voice, and coin. So for broad accent people, they're going to say fine, wife, and roid. And for the cultivated accent, they're going to say fine, wife, and ride. So those will be the main differences there with that diphthong. So a cultivated accent speaker is going to say that diphthong like the word buy, whereas broad accent people are going to say it more like in the word boy. So I and oi, that's the main difference there. Then there's also the diphthong in words like south, proud, and out, so the ow sound. The more broad the accent is, the more the first part of this diphthong sounds like the E sound in dress. So it's more of an eh sound. So they say the words south, proud, and out more like south, proud, and out. So they make it more like that eh at the start of the diphthong in south, proud, and out. At least I said it there as a cultivated accent. So a cultivated speaker might have a diphthong closer to the American sound ow, and a broad speaker might pronounce it a little closer to ow. That's one more difference. There were a few other features too that this study noticed. Words like fleece and keep, so that E sound in there, those diphthongs were more pronounced in the broad accent obviously, so probably like fleece, keep, whereas I'd say fleece and keep. Words like face and make sound like the diphthong in the American pronounced kite, so like the ite sound, so people would probably say face and make. I can't really do it in the broad accent though, that's how that would probably sound, whereas I would say face and make. And then we have words with the oo sound in them in goose and good. Apparently in a broad accent, this vowel sound is closer to the front of the mouth. So they would probably say food and goose, whereas I would say food and goose. So the study too also found some interesting stuff where the accent differed between genders depending on the vowel. So the study found that there was more variation in the pronunciation of the word heard, so that vowel sound like in a word nurse or bird, that vowel sound differed more between women than it did men. And then we had men where there was a significant difference between the variation of the pronunciation of hood. So that sound like in goose or food. There was more variation between how men pronounced that than with women. So clearly there's a big difference between genders as well as class in Australian English. Anyway, that's enough for this episode, Will. I hope it answered your question. I hope you enjoy this episode. I just want to make a little mention at the end here, guys, that I have started producing the Aussie English Supporter Pack. If you guys want to support the Aussie English podcast, please sign up to that. You'll also get premium transcripts for every single episode with bonus exercises as well as tips for language learning online. And you'll also have access to me in a private Facebook group. So you can sign up to that if you jump over to the website at www.theaussieenglishpodcast.com. It's only $9.99 per month at the moment. It's an ongoing subscription. You can cancel at any time if you don't like it. And also, if you have any suggestions for how to add more value, feel free to give me those, as I want to put as much into this as possible and make it the best learning resource that you guys can get in order to take intermediate learners to advanced. So jump over and do that in the meantime if you guys want to up your level of Australian English. All the best, guys. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope your English is kicking ass, and I'll talk to you soon. See you later.